Hey, you should definitely read this book, Spider-Man Life Story. It's amazing. What is Spider-Man Life Story? Oh well, it was a six-issue miniseries that was published in 2019 by Marvel Comics, and it was written by Zdarsky with artwork by Mark Bagley. Uh, yes, there were other people involved, but let me find their names. Well, yes, inks were by John Dell and Andrew Hennessy, colors by Frank Dermata, and the lettering was by Started Design. The main concept in Spider-Man Life Story, which is a story outside of Marvel continuity, is that we have Spider-Man and its issue represent events from a different decade in his life. So Peter Parker starts in the 60s and grows old until the 10s, until 2019, when he is 72 years old. So yes, Spider-Man is a boomer. This series is drawn by Mark Bagley, and Mark Bagley is one of those iconic Spider-Man artists. He started in the 90s. He did a lot of issues back then. He was the guy who did more than 100 issues on Ultimate Spider-Man with Brian Michael Bendis. I think they broke the record of the longest team on a Marvel comic book, record held by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby for Fantastic Four before that. And yes, he was amazing all those 20 years. He was doing Spider-Man, so nothing changed. He is still amazing. His artwork, and you'll not only see my face in this video, I'll make sure I add some pages, even though I don't want to do that to avoid spoilers, because I don't want to spoil this well, it's a graphic novel, this collection for you. It was so good, I will feel bad if it's spoiled. You have to read it. Mark Bagley is amazing in this book. Okay, that's a reason to buy it. Who is really spectacular in this book is Zdarsky. The writing in this book is amazing, spectacular. What was the other Spider-Man title? It was amazing, spectacular. There was Web, of course. There was McFarlane Spider-Man. It's not a McFarlane book. What else? Yes, they did a lot of adjectives, but it's also astonishing. And I don't know. Really, it's a great work of fiction. And if you're a fan of comic books, go get it. So, Tim Zdarsky is clearly understanding Spider-Man lore, and I talk about some very deep Spider-Man lore. He knows the events, the characters, their emotional reactions, the situations in different decades, and he manages to take all these things and reinterpret them into one shorter, more cohesive, and more impactful story. I mean, okay, the 60th issue is pretty much a retread of what we used to read in Spider-Man in the 60s. The Vietnam War is going on. Peter Parker is trying to jungle Spider-Man, working for J. Jonah Jameson, liking Gwen Stacy, but they haven't bonded yet. Flash Thompson's about to join the army and fight in Vietnam. He's feeling guilty he's not fighting for his country. Meanwhile, we'll have some shenanigans with Iron Man joining the Vietnam War, Captain America going there. We have some mentions of events from the 60s like J. Jonah Jameson financing the Spider Slayers and the Scorpion. But the main crux of the issue is the fight between the Green Goblin and Spider-Man. And things are, they feel like nostalgic. It feels very nice, a well-written story, very well paced. You feel the nostalgia for those characters. I have missed them. It's been years since I've read these old Spider-Man stories. It's really great, seeing them and being back there. It feels amazing. And at the end of the issue, something happens that didn't happen in the comic books, and so you get into a divergent timeline. Then issue 2 comes along, and it starts with a punch to your feels, because something much different from the comic books happens, and suddenly there is a lot of emotional burden on you. You feel a very strong emotion about what's happening. Also, it raises the stakes, because you know that the choices characters make have a huge impact on the events of this comic book. And since it's not the Marvel Universe, so some things are not undone there. Unlike the 616, where people die and get resurrected a year later. So you get that something is very important to everything that's happening, and the choices people make can have consequences. And that adds a lot to the story because it makes it feel more impactful, more emotional, and everything that's happening, it is happening because of other things happened before, of choices made, and these choices are not easy because of emotions. Because what a Spider-Man Life Story does amazingly well is that it deconstructs the character and also lets them evolve. It's not a deconstruction as a means of making superheroes as dark images of themselves, like they did in the 90s in the Grit and Gritty era. It's more about how these heroes are humans too, and they have failings. And while they may excel at some things, they also have they fail at other things. Actually, it's about how they change the world around them. I mean, I won't do many spoilers, but in the late 70s, the Vietnam War is still going on because superpowered beings were involved, and this made the fight take longer, despite what happened in history. And by the end of issue 2 and the events happening in there, and I won't spoil it to you, I was floored. Something important too is that every decade is mirroring events that were published during this decade. For instance, the 80s issue covers Secret Wars and the Symbiote Saga, stories that were published in the 80s. Kraven's Last Hunt, okay? It's in the back cover, so I'll spoil that. And you say, oh, that's way too many events for 30 pages of comic book. Yes, the story, the writing is so good that it ties everything together in a very good way. Every issue is a snapshot in Peter Parker's life. You get a very early idea of how he's living, how his life changed, how he's coping, who he's dating, what is his work life, etc. And also the characters grow. For instance, during the Symbiote Saga, Spidey is in his 40s, so he's growing slower, less strong, and he needs the symbiote to cope with his failings, even though he knows that the symbiote is living and it wants to bond with him and take over. And you know what? That was the initial appeal for Spider-Man, for me. The fact that Peter Parker and his friends and the rest of the supporting cast is growing along with him. For instance, in the 60s, when Peter Parker graduated from high school and went to college, it was mind-blowing because after that point, comic book heroes were in arrested development, meaning that they were not growing up, they were remaining in the status quo. And Peter Parker didn't. He went somewhere else. He graduated from the status quo to something different, something else. And the supporting cast was also very important. That was happening until the 90s, I believe, and I think the reason why Spider-Man lost in his popularity after the 90s, it was that after the Clone Saga and A Brand New Day, the character of Spider-Man hasn't grown in the way he was growing before. And after A Brand New Day, I was like, whatever. I mean, okay, Spider Island was an awesome story, but although One More Day really did a lot of damage to the character and the Clone Wars before that. And this series, let me show it again so you don't forget what you will be looking for in the comic book store when comic book stores open again. The relationships are very important for the characters, the way they grow. And since we have very limited space for them, the relationships are the highlights. You see the highlights, and the relationships of the characters are very tense, very dramatic, very tragic, and very real. They have real emotions, and they make some decisions that are not always the best for them, and that's amazing. And you know what? Back in the 70s, people loved the supporting cast of Spider-Man. I mean, they had the Amazing Spider-Man comic book, and then they made a second book, The Spectacular Spider-Man, that focused more on the supporting cast. So we had two comic books. We had the main adventures of Spider-Man, and we had the Spider-Man and his buddies in Spectacular. And then kind of jumbled together later on, but that's another story. It's very dramatic. Spider-Man Life Story is a very dramatic book, and it focuses on characters evolving and their relationships. And that's something I like, because in every issue we have Peter Parker growing up, evolving or devolving, or having to pay for his choices. And that's very important, because this book is very impactful. It's very emotional and it's very tragic, and it will give you the feels. It gave me the feels, and I really loved it. I really need to read such a good story today and in general, and I did, and I was blown away by it. And I also love how it takes the concept of superheroes and have it change the way history works, because that's something that's not quite always done in 616. And here, some of the events, the existence of superheroes changes historical facts, and those historical facts also change the outcome or the origin of certain events. I mean, the event of civil war in this version of Spider-Man starts because of 9/11, and actions foreshadowed even earlier on. It feels quite good to have this this sense of reality affecting the world. Again, there are many events happening worldwide, but it's Spider-Man, and Spider-Man is the friendly neighbor superhero. He's not getting involved with the wars, with espionage, with the Cold War or Vietnam or whatever, because that's not who Peter Parker is at his core. He's not part of the Avengers. Yes, I know there was the New Avengers. I was reading the New Avengers, but the whole concept is that Spider-Man is a low-level hero. He is fighting on the streets, criminals, his friendly neighborhood, and it's more about who Peter is and who the supporting cast, what they do. It's more about teen drama or young professional drama, soapy, and also about him fighting some villains in New York. And that's pretty much what this story focuses on, and does it quite well. I would say that this storyline over here, this little book, is the closest Marvel got to Watchmen, because Marvel doesn't quite always take superheroes and put them out of continuity into a premise or into the future, or does irrevocable things to them they don't care about because it's not affecting the rest of the 616 like DC often does. And they really need a story like that. They really need more books that take the characters we all love and put them in different situations. And this one does it amazingly well. Goes back to the basics of who Spider-Man and Peter Parker is, and plays out with him growing up and making choices and paying for those choices. And yes, it reminds me of The Watchmen because it also has to do with politics and real life consequences and what real life would be superheroes existed and all those ideas. And you may say, oh yes, okay, I get that, but it's not like Watchmen. It cannot be that good. You're overhyping it, and maybe I am, but let me tell you something. This book over here, these two guys, Zdarsky and Bagley, tackle the clone saga, and it's good and it makes sense. And that's quite an achievement, and I doubt even Alan Moore could do that. So, yeah, that's Marvel's Watchmen in my book. Hope you liked this review. If you did, press the like button, subscribe for more videos, and leave a comment if you've read the Spider-Man Life Story, and tell me your opinion. Tell me I'm overselling it and I'm overhyped, or I'm a Marvel fanboy, and I'll see you soon with another video. Thank you for watching.